All right, we are live. Hello, this is Christian Idealism, and today we have John Dunfee here, which is from, I'm sure most of you guys know him. He's from another YouTube channel called JMD Apologetics. And today we're just here to kind of have a mutual discussion about dealing with doubts. And I know John, you talked you talked about the same talk about with a lot of other people, but I know that you're trying to get it out there. So, what was your way of what kind of makes you doubt things? I guess we can talk generally, religious beliefs, but we all have doubts every day, right? So, and that includes religion. So, what do you think is the best way to approach doubts?
Almost like a court of law, because you can have reasonable doubt and you should believe things that are beyond reasonable doubt. And then I find that a lot of the time I struggle with my faith is in things in my personal life, and realizing that I haven't applied my beliefs of my reasonable doubts or beliefs beyond reasonable doubt. It ends up these beliefs that are not reasonable at all. Stuff I go through that are emotional will affect my actual beliefs because I let that control my mind. Well, it's basically a heart versus mind issue, hence the intellectual emotions versus emotional doubts. And for me, it was mostly emotional doubts. I think that is probably 95% of all doubts. And then when you let an emotional doubt control you, you start coming up with ad hoc explanations for your beliefs when you start doubting your beliefs because of something you set up or some sort of prediction you could say you had for God. So for me, it was in the realm of dating, and that's already a crap show itself. So when you get into that, you will be set up for doubts if you let oxytocin control your brain, which is all modern dating is based off of. But yeah, for me it was that for quite a bit. And I doubted God for like 2 weeks. But there are multiple doubts going on for a whole year when I invested myself in this tainted process, a process that God calls good, essentially in the Bible, but it's tainted by sin. It's just another area of life tainted by sin. So that's just one example where if you invest your time and adoration and almost you're trying to place your worth in people who are broken just like you, or a system that is tainted by sin, yeah, you're going to have emotional doubts because you're allowing that to take up your time in worship of God and of scripture reading. So when I had these doubts at first, I would start arguing to myself and others like an atheist. And funny enough, when you're in a state of emotional doubt, cognitive dissonance starts to develop. You don't realize it at first, but you're trying to rationalize things while your mind is being controlled by these emotions. And it's just like the first step is to not even think about these things until like your mind is truly in a state of non-corruption, or at least as unbiased as possible. Obviously, there's almost no human state in which the mind is completely unbiased. But that's when you just go to others and talk to people about the actual personal issues. You don't make metaphysical claims or ontological claims about the totality of reality until you've gone over those emotional doubts. Then maybe it's fair to rethink your beliefs if you can make actual intellectual connections, not emotional. So for me, I went to siblings, people on in the apologetics community to talk about these doubts, because doubts are very common among Christians and very much emotional doubts, and we can go into different types of doubts.
Right. So I like to make a distinction between what's called emotional doubts and intellectual doubts.
Yeah.
So emotional doubts seem to be the bad kind of doubt, because in that case, you're not doubting for any good reason, but rather you're doubting because something bad happened to you. Like, let's say you brought up a perfect example, which is to get your heart broken, right? Like that can create emotional doubts. Now, of course, that's not an intellectual doubt because you're not given a good reason to doubt your beliefs. You just kind of got your heart broken, and so now you're like, oh, I'm going to question my whole belief system because of what this girl did to me or whatever, right? And I think that's the bad kind of doubt. That kind of doubt is not the doubt that's going to have you learn things, because the other type of doubt, which is intellectual doubt, actually I think is a good thing, right? If you intellectually doubt something, that's actually a good thing because you can learn from your mistakes, right? That's kind of the whole process of learning. Whereas emotional doubt is not good because it doesn't help you learn anything, and it could really, you could doubt something that could actually be true, but yet you're doubting it simply because of this emotional thing that happened to you or
It's
whatever. And I
literally
think,
an appeal to emotional fallacy.
right. So I've noticed how it doesn't happen all the time, but there have been atheists that have deconverted because of some emotional trauma. Like let's say if their wife, or let's say if their spouse died of cancer, or if something terrible happened to them, and typically they'll deconvert because of that reason. Now, of course, there may be other reasons, but typically there's like this life-threatening event that happens that will cause them to have these emotional doubts. And it's weird because emotional doubts are more powerful when they first appear. Like intellectual doubts aren't really like powerful. Like let's say if I'm researching something, right, and if I find something that contradicts with my beliefs, it's not going to be as emotionally, it's not going to emotionally affect me in the same way as, let's say, if I got my heart broken, right? Because getting your heart broken is going to have an instant, stronger effect on your well-being than.
I think it depends on the content of the truth, because some intellectual truths can be very emotional, like and you should only derive your emotions from certain truths. Like, for example, if you realize you did something wrong, it's logically okay to feel regret, shame, and guilt
Right.
at that point. So that the truth of that claim, let's say you end up breaking someone's heart and then you realize it, but you don't take the right actions, and that will just build up over more. But why people get their hearts broken so easily, it's really almost an emptiness in their life and a gap. And even Christians have this, where they just feel empty. So they try and place their happiness. That's the key word there, because as Aristotle says, and Augustine says, and Aquinas says, that everyone's end goal is happiness, and people find it in the wrong places, and we create these idols for ourselves, which that's what idolatry really is, where you give your worship time, thanksgiving, and literally you derive your worldview from certain things. And for some people, it's this feeling of eros love, which is just affectionate love when you first start dating or whatever. And you need that to fulfill your life, and it's just like when you have that, that's when doubts come into play, because you're just doubting yourself at that point. And then what you took to be true with God, you doubt that as well, even though that's no reason to doubt God whatsoever. And that was sort of my reasoning. I wouldn't say I had a void in my life, but like it was something I struggled with for the longest time, and then I just got over it when I realized what the problem actually was. I literally used my mind and let my mind control my emotions. Now, obviously, emotions come up once in a while, but I don't let that control what I do with my life anymore. And I think that's one thing that will really help with doubts, if you train your mind in the right way, just reading philosophy and studying wisdom and truth. And what I did first was go to Proverbs, and I read through the entire book of Proverbs in like 4 days, and gathered my favorite verses that spoke to the issue I was going through. And then I went through Ecclesiastes and then Job. I'm still going through Psalms. I just finished up James yesterday, which is basically the New Testament book of Proverbs. So like literally just gaining wisdom and living your life by that, living your life by wisdom. And then integrity, which is moral characteristics, applying wisdom to your morality, basically how you live your life. If you go to Psalm 102, David gives a psalm of integrity. And then reason, letting literally logic guide your mind at that point, and not letting emotions guide you. But obviously, with the culture we live in, wisdom and truth is not the priority for people. Priorities for people are their own priorities that they create with their subjective experiences and opinions.
Well, actually, I mean, I guess we could discuss this another time, which is relationships and dating, because I'm sure that has an impact on doubt, right?
Oh, I honestly think it's a huge reason why many young men in their early 20s, or before or mid-teens or whatever, leave the church because they had someone break their heart, or they just struggle with that because they're putting their value, purpose, morality, happiness in this one person, or in a system that's broken and worse than they started off as, and it makes them even worse and bitter. That's why people get into toxic relationships. Well, yeah, we can talk about that later as well. Going back to, actually, interestingly enough, Pine Creek, he says most people aren't into philosophical arguments. I commented on one of his live streams. I completely agree. And because of that, that's why you get so many non-believers, I think, and Christians who don't like apologetics, because they don't live by lovers of wisdom and lovers of truth, which as a Christian, you are called by that in the very greatest commandment: love the Lord your God with all your mind, soul, heart, and strength. Because wisdom is wisdom is understanding and applying that understanding the right way, which is, how you live your life and morality and so on. And when you love God when you give God that, and you let God's wisdom that he gives you through scripture and what he might reveal to you in your own personal life, and the understanding from your understanding through Christian apologetics or philosophy, when you live by that and not your own subjective emotions and thoughts only inside your head, and you don't research it or go to others who have struggled with the same stuff, you're gonna have a much more successful Christian life and life in general, because you're not going to the same thing that keeps breaking you. And when you do that, you're culpable at first, but when you first get your heart broken, or you have these doubts, they're perfectly normal, they're perfectly fine. But if you let them control you,
right.
Which I think people have true, genuine libertarian free will, where they can control their emotions at a certain point. When you first go through it, it's just natural, it's rational. I mean, you had your heart broken, so that's the truth, and it's okay to live in that truth for a couple of weeks until you actually deal with it properly. But if you don't deal with it properly, you're going to let it rule your life, and you're just keeping making the same mistakes over and over again, because that's still your idol, and God is not.
No, right. And it's funny because it seems like at least more recently, every time I've had doubts, it's because of that same reason. It's not really a rational doubt per se. It's more of a doubt that kind of happened. Like, let me just briefly explain. So I was talking to this girl online. I'm not going to mention her name but I was talking to this girl in this dating app, and we started talking to her on Snapchat multiple times, and then eventually got to the point where I realized that she didn't care, because she wasn't really. She gave me one word answers, not really caring about. Like, I even showed her my YouTube channel, this channel, and she didn't. She's like, "Oh, that's cool," but I don't think she ever watched anything I did. And so once I realized that she never wanted to actually pursue with the relationship, I just stopped. And when that happened, that's when I had to. That's when I guess got heartbroken for a few days, right? But I mean, for a few days I was like seriously doubting my belief system, and then I woke up one day and I'm like, oh, I'm fine now. And so it just sometimes it's very interesting how heartbreaks, they'll create these chemical interactions inside our minds that will kind of make us have irrational thoughts, irrational beliefs, and then one day once we go away, we realize like, hey, that was completely irrational to have those thoughts, right? Because it's all emotional. It's not really based on logic or reason. It's all just based on one event happening. So, yeah.
Well, in the example of most people are dating because they're firstly, just stop using Snapchat to talk to girls. Just talk to girls.
Yeah, I know. Well,
I learned that the hard way, and literally, since I've been dating myself, I can talk to girls easier, and it's pretty normal once you actually do it, because narcissistic culture and social media and memes just makes it so much more complicated when that's all you focus on. It's just like, actually be a normal human being. And by normal, I mean proper function, not just what is the normality of society. Because if you live by that, then you're going to take place.
Well, it's very interesting because when I was talking to her, I found myself going on Snapchat a lot when I don't normally go on Snapchat. Like, I didn't really, for me, I didn't really care about philosophy that much. I was reading books, but I wasn't doing it as I should have.
Yeah.
I kind of broke that cycle. And my
Did
mind.
you have notifications on?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what your brain does to you. Because as soon as you hear that beep, you're just like, oh man, she got back to me. It's just like, no, that's not normal or healthy physically, mentally speaking. But going back to a certain type of doubt I was talking about. Now I lost mind. Oh yeah, that feeling. It's because of that heartbrokenness from before, that people just want the feeling and they don't really care about the commitment in a relationship. And you can just tell by the way they go about relationships that they don't actually understand relationships. But what I did was, oh wait, I just applied my normal relationships with friends and family, and it's just like, oh wait, if you apply this to the same level, just with more feelings and whatnot, it makes more sense instead of just going off of a feeling. But which is just oxytocin. But going back, people like this feeling because it makes them feel secure for a while, because they just don't have purpose, or they have a void in their life, and it's almost like a drug addiction. Well, it literally is. Yeah, it literally is. Because drug users, I honestly think most people start doing drugs because they have the same problem. My cousin did this, and she's dead, by the way. But and literally she kept going to the same feeling that kept hurting her. But like she was someone who didn't have purpose or initiative in her life, or didn't know what she wanted to do with her life, and didn't really have a sense of self-value. People go into dating with that, and obviously it's not as harmful as drugs, unless you get into a very toxic relationship and you can't leave that relationship because of that feeling and trauma bonding.
I've seen a lot of girls that I knew would constantly have a boyfriend. Like they would be with their boyfriend for about like a few months or about a year, and then they would break up, and then right afterwards it'd be with someone new, like that fast. And it's like they keep going with the same. It's like this cycle where they keep going to the same type of people and trying to get that, that love high constantly. And it's like, I think the reason why is because without that, or if they're trying to pursue a real relationship and not just this oxytocin crap, then, you have to constantly get that oxytocin without actually being committed to any type of real relationship. Right.
Well, oxytocin is mostly with affection or storge love, as C.S. Lewis talks about, which is parental love. And it's just like, if you need to get this from a boyfriend or girlfriend immediately, and that's the only need you have, then it could be you have that issue. I'm not being a jerk when I say that, but literally that could be the issue.
I think it is.
You need to have a self-identity and work on yourself. And I know people have worked on themselves, then they're perfectly normal when it comes to dating, and then people who don't, and then just do the exact same thing as you were talking about, because that helps them deal with their void in their life and their doubts about themselves, because they need this soulmate or someone to complete them, when in all reality it's just a feeling and someone, not a choice, not a commitment.
It's just like what's funny, because I mean it's like a drug. Well, I mean it is a drug, but more precisely, they don't really care about the person, so to speak. They only care about the high that they get from like the other person. So like, let's say if some girl's dating some guy, right? You're gonna have this oxytocin going, but they don't really care about the relationship, so to speak. They only really care about getting that need or that high. So they don't care about the person. They only care about the oxytocin that comes with having that relationship.
Well, right? they don't know it's just oxytocin. They almost view it as this metaphysical aspect of reality that creates the truth for them. And when that's literally just subjectivism and postmodernism, and it's basically in Plato's Symposium of this feeling of two souls who are tied together. And people almost have they obviously don't think about the metaphysics of the universe, because the fact that they're in this type of system in the first place may imply that they're not at least applying their metaphysics to how they live their life. And they almost need this person to complete them. Let me tell you, two broken people can't, as William Lane Craig says, two fallacious arguments don't make a sound argument. So two broken people don't make a complete relationship. It takes two complete people who are already happy and want to share their happiness with someone. But that's in relationships. This is just an example for doubts and how something like that could be used to deal with doubts. Right. Because it literally gets rid of the truth in your life. You're literally using this as a temporary solution to what's actually going on in your life. You have a purpose and identity issue, and you need to find that in God, or at least think about it through philosophy. I think God is the best way to get your identity, especially in the Christian worldview of the Imago Dei. But other than that, and going back to doubts, this would be passive doubts, where the church has done a horrible job, and mega churches just do a horrible job with this, where they talk about the gospel, they focus on the future, but they don't focus on the now. They don't focus on geez, going back to dating, we could use this since we both struggled with this for a while. You know, I've had no one in the church to, you know, actually help me with these issues. And because I don't have that connection or relationship with someone in the church, you don't know who to go to, and you don't have people who you're able to open up with these questions and doubts you're having. And then that's when you just leave it to yourself. And when you leave it to yourself, you just go back to the same thing that broke you in the first place, because you're not open-minded. You're almost afraid of change itself.
Right.
And the church needs to deal with those passive doubts. And passive doubts would be like, what do I want to do with my life almost? Or where's God during this? And other things like that. Basically life issues. And mega churches at least need to work on that. You know, these prosperity gospel churches are horrible when it comes to the gospel firstly, and, you know, how it actually applies to people's lives.
Right. And I do think that church has done a terrible job, not just with doubts, but I mean with that whole, at least making that distinction between intellectual doubt and emotional doubt.
And you're right, and yet it's such an easy distinction, but yet Christians don't understand that.
Right.
And like I said, emotional doubts are fine, but you can't let them rule you. Like, I still have some emotional doubts, but I just realize they're emotional doubts, and they just don't faze me as much. Yeah, they're a concern. I want to get that concern in my life fixed eventually, but like, until then, I'll live in the truth, which is the greatest freedom, as Augustine says.
Do you think
according to that? Yeah, I think they're wrong because they're just unrealistic. I mean, just read the book of Job and Ecclesiastes, and Scripture doesn't hide from that.
Right. So,
and that's funny because Christians will end up blaming God for their problems. And it's just like, well, firstly, if you believe that the Bible is, you know, the Word of God, authentic Word of God, and you don't go to it, whose fault is that? Most certainly not God's. Because, you know, the answers are right in front of you at that point.
So yeah, maybe, yeah. I mean, here's the thing is, doubts are not bad. It's only when the doubts are caused by something that's not rational, right? So I think so, I mean, and in dating, especially with guys and girls, it can cause doubts. Like, people, because what the problem is, they don't really care about God per se. They only care about getting that, like I said, that love high. I like to call it a love high because that's pretty much what it is, right? Where you find somebody and you want to you don't really care about them, but you only care about, you know, having that sort of feeling of oneness.
I used to be gentle with people like that and more respectful, and then you realize what they do to people is literally almost how drug users manipulate people. They manipulate people, and it's on both sides. Like, guys will act like nice guys because they just want sex. Or,
Right.
they almost want the high feeling themselves. For girls, it's mostly that high feeling or affectionate need. That's why girls play games, and that's why guys are brutes without reason, or brutes with reason, and they know how to work girls, and they know how to get that, and then they're either use their experience or, you know, age over, you know, younger guys like me and you, and just work girls.
Yeah,
or, you know, the girls know how to work guys because they've dated multiple guys and they don't actually want a relationship. They want pragmatic usage and just that high feel. Then when they get bored, they move on to the next guy. Just
until they get really old and they realize, oh crap, I never got what I really wanted. So yeah.
Well, it depends on the type.
Like a marriage. Well, I'm talking about a marriage, right? Because that's the end. Like, if that's the end goal, why? Like, my question is, if marriage is the end goal, then why is it that people date multiple people? Now, of course, you could say, oh, well, to find the right guy, but then it's like, okay, well,
if
you know,
if you go from, you know, one guy to a guy within a week, yeah, firstly, marriage isn't your end goal. Or if it is, then you just don't know what marriage means, and your expectations are unrealistic, and they're part of these Disney movies of expectations where it is a soulmate. But or you're just playing games because you just want that love feel. Now, granted, some girls who do that, they do that because they've been hurt and they have a low self-esteem because guys have hurt them so bad, and I get that. And that's why I'm only hostile or reductionistic, at least. If you're reductionistic of me or others, and you hurt others because of you've been hurt, it's just like there is no excuse for that. Now this is back into dating, but I would just say that I'm only reductionist when you reduce because people will say love isn't reducible in modern dating. It's just like, no, it is. It literally is. Just scientifically, we can understand it to just be a neurotransmitter that you don't know about or aren't conscious of. And it's just like, if you are, and that's all you're doing, then you shouldn't be dating in the first place, because you're wasting other people's times and their emotions. Rational human beings and normal human beings who will go through those emotions, and even let that end up controlling them. And well, actually, they're not the originator of those emotions, because of the person who does that ultimately is the ultimate cause of those emotions. So, but what you do with those emotions, you're the originator of, not them. But yeah, that's going back to that whole area. But let me tell you, there's so many other struggles in life, and it all stems from the self-doubt in yourself, or these idols we set up for ourselves, something we want above God, or just above truth and morality and wisdom. And it's just like, when you don't live your life according to truth and reality itself, then yeah, of course you're going to have doubts, because your source of those doubts aren't reality itself. Now, if you're pursuing reality and you have a conceived notion of reality, and then you discover something about reality that contradicts that previous view you have of reality, then that's rational doubt, and that's good. You're changing, you're open-minded, and so on. Well, if you literally if you almost literally live like a solipsist, and like all that matters is what's in my mind for me and how I live my life, then yeah, you're going. Firstly, that's just selfishness and egoism, and develops a sense of entitlement there. Basically, egoism at its finest. And yeah, you're gonna have many self-doubts, because you truly doubt yourself at that point, or you're most certainly overconfident in yourself, and that will end up giving you bad and unsound discernment, and you'll end up making decisions that just hurt you even worse. I've done that, and I know people who've done that, and it's just a logical connection there. But yeah, we talk about passive doubts. I guess another type of doubt would be institutional, which would be Christians as hypocrites, or what's going on in the Catholic Church and so on. And people just view that as, wait, if God is in control here, then why is this going on? That's both somewhat emotional and intellectual, because like, honestly, yeah, that bothers you, and it's not a personal issue yourself. You actually look at it rationally. It's just like, well, geez, God seems to be in control here, but yet these are happening. Then you just got to realize, well, do you have a high view of yourself, and are you not one of these hypocrites, or were you one of these hypocrites, and you realize, yeah, people are hypocrites, and it's not God's fault. It's people's free will and what they do to manipulate people for power and so on. Of course, it takes place in the system itself, but again, the church isn't a building; it's a people, and the people who are in the building who aren't of the people and who corrupt the system in the first place aren't of the church, and that's one distinction that helps with those types of doubts. I won't say it saved my faith, because like, obviously, to be a committed Christian, it's both emotional and intellectual. I would say my emotional aspect of my life derives from the truths, which comes from apologetics, but I'd say a lot of philosophy has helped with that. What argument convinced him that God exists? The cumulative case in most of them. How do you deal with the counter arguments? I actually looked at them rationally, and like I did one article. I could probably add 10 or 20 more objections to the Kalam cosmological argument, but I actually looked at real objections that were given. And usually when some online atheists, when they realize that you've refuted their objection, they just say, oh, you just made that one up, it was a straw man. And literally you can look up a deconverted man video or a godless engineer video, or apologia video, and be like, no, this is literally what they argued, and I dealt with it in this one article or whatnot. So how I deal with it, I actually watch atheists like Sam Harris. I watch all these YouTube atheist channels. I watch Pine Creek because he watched a lot of my streams. So yeah, I actually look at what they say. I look at it rationally. Of course, it comes from I'm a Christian, but I don't let that completely control it. I say, well, okay, does this actually stand against the premise of the Kalam, everything that begins to exist, and what does that mean? And then, then Krauss goes into his different views of nothing. Or, you can get into mereological nihilism, which is most certainly an objection used. And I think I've worked a way out with mereological nihilism. I'm working on a video. Craig deals with it fine, but I have a different way of dealing with it. But it just depends on the objection, and firstly, where its origin takes place. I'm not going for genetic fallacy there, but is it actually a rationally thought out objection, or is it just pure conjecture? And a lot of the time, a lot of objections are just assertions and subjective conjecture, which doesn't shake my beliefs at all, because they don't have content to shake anything I believe in the first place. So it really depends on the objection. If it's like a real philosophical, in-depth objection, I'll actually think about it quite a lot. I've thought a lot about the ontological argument. And, I used to use the moral argument. I don't think I use it anymore because I'm now a virtue ethicist, and I'm sort of combining the moral argument with Aquinas's fourth way of degrees of betterness, or perfection, you could say. And when you combine the two, you can actually turn that into an argument for God's existence. But apologetics helps because it helps deal with the questions, but really it's a choice I have to make on my part. But I let wisdom rule my life because I try and live my life that way, because I'm a philosophy major and I want to be a lover of wisdom and truth. So and because of that guide, Christianity made the most sense in that, and that's how I've lived my life since then.
Long answer.
Yeah, long answer. Basically, word salads and mental crush summed up.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we kind of went over most of the stuff. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of add in?
Yeah, I know there's another type of doubt. You got passive, intellectual, emotional. It's in this one book, it lost me, where they actually review all the Barno groups. Because there's a whole section just on doubts for why people leave. See if I can find it here. I guess one thing would say, since I brought up faith, there are two types of Christians, and then the actual type of one who has true faith. You got the inch deep faith, which is just like, I sing worship songs. I get my emotional high from worship on Sundays, and then I'll live my other 6 days of the week like I'm a Christian, but it's a title, not a lifestyle. And then you got the Christian who almost knows all the way, all the knowledge, all the head knowledge. So they have a mile deep faith, but yet it's very shallow at the same time, and they don't actually apply it, and they're conscious of that. And those are the type of hypocrites, the extreme hypocrites that James warns us about, and they end up being the types of Pharisees, and they need to turn from that and actually apply that knowledge and live in wisdom and live their life according to that and actually live with some integrity. So those are, if you're the Christian that actually has that head knowledge and applies it rationally and morally and wisely, then that is a true faith, because a faith that is not worth testing isn't faith in the first place. And both camps of that inch wide and mile shallow, or however I described it, those are the two types of faiths that are almost not worth, are incomplete faiths, because on one point, and apologetics, you don't argue people into the kingdom. Those are the people with the inch deep faith. And then the head knowledge one, they find something that's very suitable for them in their life, and they live that because it's more convenient for them. It's a moral issue at that point, and they don't actually apply their faith to that aspect, and they almost will try and ad hocly rationalize it after they live according to that thing that blocks them from actually applying their faith. This book also talks about anti-science and the whole young Earth creationism stuff. But that's a whole other podcast in and of itself. Trying to find this one. Okay, here it is. Okay, so unexpressed doubts would be those type of doubts that you keep to yourself and you don't talk to others. You know, Proverbs says to seek counsel, and that's why the church is there, and that's almost God's way of saying, hey, talk to these people. They've been through the same thing you have and gotten over it, so see how they deal with it. And that unexpressed doubts can be any sort of content. It just depends on the person. So yeah, we talk about institutional and expressed doubt. Yeah, I think I covered most of the doubts they talk about in this book. But yeah, this is also a good book to deal with doubts, philosophy, because they go over the 6 main reasons why people our age and a little bit older and a little bit younger leave the church. I think you can sum it up into idolatry, basically, in a nice way of saying it. But
idolatry, what do you mean?
Well, you now, of course, the church hasn't done the right job of, giving them the right methodology and tools for dealing with issues in life. And yeah, that's the church's fault. But we take these things in our life and we let that control us, like I talked about before with dating, and we put that above God and we give that our time and we try and derive our meaning from that. And when you try and do that, when you put that above God, you just first of all, that's the first instance in which you've given up God in your life, and then God will just slowly become, oh yeah, I believe in a higher power, that sort of type of belief in Christian faith. And it just becomes like a title at that point, not a lifestyle, not a Christian actually living by faith.
So I have a question. So if dating cannot give you, at least if dating is not the correct way to derive meaning, then how do you derive meaning from God?
Well, firstly, if we both agree that God is the necessary being of reality, then you should go to reality itself for your meaning, not subjective people who are dealing with the same issues. And in the Christian worldview, since we're both Christians, I'd say that's where you can best derive it from, because, like, obviously, if God creates and then deism or even classical theism is true, or Plato's and Aristotle's unmoved mover, you have ethics theory from that, and then I would say live your life based on wisdom and understanding. And Aristotle connects that to necessary truths about reality. So at least go to reality, and they at least view that this unmoved mover is behind all of reality. But I'm going back to the Christian point. I view agape love, God's love, and God actually wants you to live your life according to this, because really it's for you, not for him. And whenever you reject God, God is upset, not because he's lost something, but because he's so loving that you've lost something. And each person is subjective in the sense that how God's agape love applies to them. But I'd say that's where you first get your meaning and love from, because that's love that can love the unlovable and the broken. And the natural love, which is affectionate friendship, and eros love, sexual love, those don't derive from it. And through agape love, you should live those loves out. What would you say that? Would you say that one needs to be a formal communicant of the Christian Church in order to conduct authorized apologetical work? Are they saying someone part of a church, like an official member of a church, like an elder or something, for this question?
Yeah.
I'd say you could start an apologetics group at your church if they don't have one.
Which most don't.
Yeah.
At least in my experience. I don't know if that's actually true, but I've noticed a lot of churches don't have any apologetics at all. It's kind of pathetic, in my view.
Someone says psychology seems like my thing. It used to not be, but then I realized humans are very easy to understand when they're humans are only unique when I think they live in the truth and find their identity from that, because God is infinite in that way with how he creates us. But when we put ourselves in brokenness and corrupt systems that are purely emotional and conjecture, then yeah, people are very easy to understand, and basic psychology just allows you to understand how a person is acting, not how a person is in their essence and their ontology, but how they're psychologically acting in those moments in which they invest themselves in dating or whatnot for the wrong reasons. And it's just like, well, yeah, we can literally use drug addicts as not an analogy, but as a comparison for what happens when you just let this feeling control you. or not even just the feeling, but like you need to find your value in this soulmate partner, which is so dangerous that you will not find a soulmate. You'll end up in a toxic relationship most likely.
Well, actually, it's funny because that's kind of where the whole concept of hell well, not hell, but like the torture in hell. It's basically these people finding their identity in something that's not God, and then that thing destroying them from the inside.
Yeah, I just call those idols, and I think it's hell is just you living your idolatry, and that's what, and literally that's almost the strongest choice you make for your life, because that's literally an end you choose for yourself, and that's why I think people, once they're in hell, almost can't leave it, because they've set that end for themselves from the very beginning when they rejected God. And I don't know. I think most likely people don't get a second chance or whatnot, because I think they've made that decision for themselves almost and lived their life according to it. Because even in hell, I think there could be a sense of enjoyment, but then you just end up in the same process over and over again. But this is sort of the great divorce almost that C.S. Lewis talks about. That's my view of hell at the moment, but that could change. I could become a nihilist if I find Chris Date's stuff compelling. I haven't looked into it, so I definitely will never be a universalist, because it just makes no sense whatsoever.
Oh, okay. We'll see about that.
Yeah, I'd be up for doing a podcast on that.
Yeah, well, actually, I do think that universalism is the most probable, but I'm not dogmatic about it. Like because some people are like, oh, well, I know universalism is true. I don't claim that it is. I just think that it's most probable, because I guess for me, I don't see how anyone could eternally reject God. I think that's, I don't think it's really feasible in my mind, but some people have different opinions.
Well, I've just seen people literally reject God in such clear moments, and it's just like, if you're in this state of separation from God, then not eternally, but that potential infinite forever, I don't see why not, if they've set themselves up for that and God isn't present. Now they may realize, oh goodness, I made that, but I don't even think that realization will be possible at that point, because people will have their minds so tainted and corrupted that thought probably won't even come up, because that's a thought of hope, and you've given up hope in this life if you're in hell, I think. Now, obviously, it gets down to, well, about those who have never heard and so on, and Mormonism and all that good stuff. I don't have answers for certain. Like you could give me a specific case, I wouldn't have an answer, because I'm not God. I don't have his knowledge. But in the general sense, those who have that knowledge and take the same actions of the demons, I think because of that, you do end up sending yourself there freely. It's not the shotgun analogy they always give, from the atheist experience. But there's a lot into that. I'm still developing my views on hell, but like that, those are sort of my thoughts on it at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm more candor with it, which is just realistic, because emotions don't affect me as much anymore.
Well, actually, I mean, I've thought about this before. I think hell won't be any more different than Earth, at least currently. Like it may be, I think it'll be a little worse than what we're dealing with now, but other than that, I don't think hell is going to be any more different than what we see, on Earth right now. What do you think?
Oh, well, yeah, let me tell you, if life was just getting a job and then having a family and just doing the same job, the office work, some people call that a living hell and a living nightmare, because you do the same thing over and over again, and there's nothing fun to life or actual anything about reality. That's just your reality. Right. And like that's why I've even if I'm somehow wrong about Christianity, philosophy is like more fulfilling than just trying to earn money and then
well, sadly, I mean, most people that's how they think. Like my own parents, I try to talk to them about philosophy, but they're like, oh, I don't really care about philosophy. I just care about like my everyday life, going to work, raising the kids. It's like, do you really not care about the nature of reality? It's like, no, I don't. Like my dad flat out told me, I don't care about the nature of reality. I only care about, making money and living my life. And it's like, it's pretty sad. And that's how most people think.
And I think Lewis almost talked about this in The Great Divorce, but I think people literally take something above God and say, no, I don't care about God, or God is irrelevant in my life. That's not a logical claim whatsoever, because they're not looking into reality, the foundational reality and reality itself. They're just relying on their own subjective experience that gives them that value, meaning, and purpose, and they stick with that. And then you can almost view hell as I don't know the metaphysics of hell, or what hell is like, but you could almost view hell as you repeating your idol you've taken up, but realizing the consequences of that and having to live with that. But that's sort of my view at the moment. I mean, I could become a universalist, but if I were to change, I'd probably be an annihilationist, because there's some interesting stuff, because obviously hell isn't as much in the Old Testament as it is the New. So I get where people come from with that, at least.
Yeah. You can answer that. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go grab it.
I'm reading Aristotle's Ethics because I'm trying to live my life according to that, and I actually want to do a series on that.
So, John, what are you reading?
Aristotle's Ethics.
Oh. I'm reading 2 books. I read 2 books at once most of the time. So I read this and then this big one. So yeah, it's gonna take a while, but
what is Aristotle's Revenge about?
It's philosophy. It's called it goes over the philosophy of nature. Like whether or not there's teleology or it's interesting. But Tim Howard is the one that told me to read it, so I'm gonna read it.
He's good at telling others what to do, but he doesn't do it himself, basically.
Yeah, he. I wonder when he's gonna have his next video. Probably not until next year. We'll see.
Well, let us see. Oh no, I typed in my name. I'm just seeing. I think his last live stream was actually on my birthday. Let's see, because it was with Josh Rasmussen. Dude, he's been on for 2 years and he only has 16 videos. I love Tim though. I just like messing with him because it's funny.
Yeah.
He does make good thumbnails though. Yeah, a month ago. Really almost 2 months coming up here.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to I'm gonna try to make better thumbnails after, because I still have like my last video in the quantum medicine series that's coming out this Friday. I'm actually going to be premiering it because it's probably the most important video of all of them. But yeah, I'm going to definitely have better thumbnails, hopefully. We'll see. But yeah.
Yeah, I usually have Stillman make my thumbnails, so I take the easy way out. I used to make thumbnails like you, and I laughed when you first started. I laughed because you literally did the exact same thing I did, record PowerPoint presentations and make the same type of thumbnails. Just like, this is funny.
What are you going to have for more videos, though? Like with backgrounds and...
Well, right now, after I do this long video on doubt, because I won't finish that up, I took a break just to see how I would feel after, because I'm sort of halfway done, or 3/4 done with it or whatnot. I don't know the full length of it, but I just want to see how, since I've taken my methodology and I'm doing much better than when I first started going through those doubts, and I'm going to not make that, start recording some stuff for that. I'm just going to finish this article on relationships and post that, and
maybe
just be done with the topic.
When relationships come out, we could talk about that if you want at a later time. But
yeah. most certainly, because it's not apologetics in nature, but it's most
It's
certainly
relevant in the
Yeah.
sense that, like I was talking about earlier, how it is a big part of a lot of people's emotional doubt. So I think it is relevant to apologetics, even if it doesn't seem relevant, but when you really look into it, I think it is relevant, at least in some sense. So yeah.
Yeah. One more thing on doubts: eat healthy, do exercise, because that literally helps your body, and when your body is relaxed, you're more relaxed.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually have to go on a diet, no sugar, no carbs. That's my next big life change.
It's a good life change.
Yeah.
You could just become Alex O'Connor and just go full vegan.
We'll see about that. I could do that, but yeah.
I couldn't.
I don't think I like meat too much, so I don't think I'll do that, but we'll see. I mean, yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, but yeah, eat healthy. Actually focus on some activities other than your doubts, because if you just self-meditate on those, even though it's really difficult to do, but for others it's easier to do. And if it's easier, if you're the type of person where you need to be doing something to get off of those thoughts, then yeah, do stuff. And eventually your mind will just relax. Your body and brain takes more time to recover, but your mind will become more relaxed once your body is more relaxed as well, and vice versa. But yeah. And then ultimately I'd say go to wisdom, truth, virtue, and I think you'll find God if you use those as your lens in epistemology. But if you're a Christian, go to God then for those already. So, and if they're intellectual doubts, then do research and talk to. Well, I'd say go to. I'm only 22. I've been doing apologetics for like 6 years now, but I'd say go to people who have been doing this longer and are experts in certain fields, and talk with them about those specific doubts.
I'm agnostic on the Nephilim. What about you, John?
I get the arguments that they could have been giants, but I think I take the view that this is describing their ego almost as they view themselves as giants in some sense. I have a video with Ted Wright where I took this clip because someone asked him the same question, so I sort of take his view. It's not the biggest concern of mine, but
yeah, honestly, I don't really care. It's so.
Well, it's not that I don't care about it. I always find biblical archaeology and topics like that interesting. It's just it's not my focal point or focus at the moment.
Yeah. All right, we're almost at the hour mark. Anything else, or I think we've pretty much gone over everything.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some other stuff. Yeah, I'd just say put God above secondary emotional needs, basically, is
right.
my motto there. And let wisdom, integrity, and reason guide your thinking, and not pure subjective conjecture.
Old Testament. I think you should just look at the ancient context, and especially like with the so what are they called? The Canaanites. Yeah, so when it comes to the Canaanites, I think we need to look at the ancient context, understand that it was exaggerated. So it probably didn't happen in the way it was described. So for that, I would recommend John Walton's work, because he's gone over a lot of that, and so yeah.
He's just another one of those heretics that takes man's word over God's word.
Yeah. Yeah, John Walton is it's weird because I bought a few of his books, but I got sucked up into something else, so I'm not even reading his stuff right now. But yeah. All right. Well, I think that's it. Maybe next time we're on, we can discuss relationships and kind of go more deeper into that, because I feel like that is definitely an issue when it comes to doubts.
Well,
At least, I can know it from personal experience. Like I've noticed every time I get heartbroken about something, I typically have irrational doubts. So yeah.
Well, relationships just doesn't apply to marriage or boyfriend or girlfriend. You have other types of relationships, and when you have the right type of relationships in those other areas, and then those are people who are willing to talk to you, and you can be open with about these. And let me tell you, people will help you much more than you can help yourself when it comes to these types of issues. And having true friends, having true loving parents who actually care about those emotional things, not just your pragmatic needs like, oh, what are you going to do with your life? Do you have a job yet? Have you worked yet? And while you're going through these emotional doubts that literally are controlling you somewhat, and those aren't even of your concerns, and those are their primary concerns for you. Besides those, having good parents, good friends, and good people in the church is always good in relationships. But you want to talk about more specific types of relationships, which is cool.
Yeah. Actually, I don't. So I don't really. The moral argument I've never found really convincing. Inspiring philosophy's moral argument, for example, is invalid. I used to think it was valid, but then once I kind of once I thought about it more, I realized it was not valid. So I'm not a fan of.
I'm not telling you said that.
You can go ahead. I got to be honest with myself. Like I don't think the argument's valid. At least in the way that he presents it in the video. But I've never really been a fan of moral argument, so I don't I wouldn't have a problem with an atheistic ethics, if you want to call it that. But I do think that what's it called? I do think that virtue ethics is definitely true in that sense. So
that's where it's at. Yeah. No, like you can have an ethical system without being a Christian, but okay, is it rational or logical depending on what our reality actually is?
Yeah.
And in some cases, I want to sort of develop a virtue ethics moral argument, which I think would be so much more helpful because I can actually connect it to wisdom and knowledge.
No, right.
And that would make it easier, and then point to, well, you can't really get these things. And this is some argue moral arena arguments where it's just like, well, on atheism, can we really get this such thing as morality, even subjective morality? And then they start arguing, well, the prior probability of consciousness, the prior probability of, all this other good stuff. And they sort of argue for morality that way. I sort of want to combine the two almost. And maybe we could add that to phase one as well
for what? Oh, the argument?
Yeah, because
here's the thing. Most Craig's moral argument is a non sequitur. Okay, IP's moral argument is invalid. But I do think you can make it valid. But I think you'd have to change the premises, and so.
How is Craig's a non sequitur?
Well, premise one I think is a non sequitur. So, I don't think it follows that if moral values exist, then God exists, or if moral values don't exist, then God doesn't exist.
It's unsound because a non sequitur would be that the conclusion just doesn't follow from the premises. So it's just another way of saying invalid. Because it's the right. It's in if then conjunction. So if this is the case and that is the case, this is the case. Therefore, that is the case. That's proper logic. But I can get it because for my problem with it is it's too vague, and it's
I know
how some libertarians describe free will, and it just sounds like the compatibilist view of free will. I get where the libertarians come from, but it's really vague and doesn't have much content and not enough anthropology to it, and that's why it can seem really confusing. I think libertarian free will makes a lot of sense in reading Aristotle and this idea of deliberation as choice, but a whole other topic.
I would say no, depending on how you define naturalism. So yeah, that's what I would say. It really, because I've heard so many different definitions of naturalism. I don't I don't even know if naturalism is a coherent concept once you like break down the definitions. If you say that naturalism is just casual events, well, quantum hermeticism is naturalism because it literally just has casual things. That's the principle of cause and effect. So I mean, I think it really depends on how you define naturalism. So if you define naturalism as everything within the laws of physics, then obviously no, it doesn't refute naturalism. So yeah. But the problem, I guess, yeah, naturalism to me it's just I think they keep on changing the goalpost, shifting the goalpost, and it just makes no sense. So whatever. All right. Well, we're at the hour mark, so you can go. I'm gonna answer these last questions, and then I'm gonna stop the stream. So
I can hang around.
all right.
Unless you want me to leave, because I give that appeal to some people.
Naturalism. Well, if that's the definition, then I'm a naturalist too. So I mean, I don't really like. If you're just going to define naturalism as the belief that the universe can be explained by the laws of physics, well, I don't disagree with that. I think it can. So, I mean,
well, are the laws of physics descriptive of what goes on in the universe, which doesn't really give them an ontological essence, or are these the rules of reality themselves?
Yeah,
descriptive.
I don't know. Let's see. I would say no, it's not the same thing because materialism is an ontological view, whereas naturalism just seems to be redefining. So naturalism can be materialism, but not all forms of materialism are naturalism. So
well, you could be like an atheist Platonist, and
right, that would be natural
material. Yeah, I just questioned the whole thing in the first place, but
right. So
I think there are atheist Platonists. Like, isn't not Hegel? Hegel's like this weird, goofy idealist. Where like, no, I'm thinking of Thomas Nagel.
Thomas Nagel, yeah.
I know he's a moral realist. I think because IP.
He is.
So would he be like a Platonist?
Maybe, but I mean, he does believe in teleology, so it's kind of weird. His view is very close to theism, but it's not theism because.
Well, you're right. It's the invisible blue muffin with blueberries, and one of those blueberries were sacrificed for you.
You can't. Well, I mean, it is. Well, I mean, Mr. Brass is right to call love a chemical reaction in the brain, but at the same time, I think you can have free will under naturalism.
When people reduce love to just that feeling, of course, it's just a chemical reaction. It's just a neurotransmitter. Then you derive your truth of love from that. But as a Christian, I believe love is the metaphysics of the universe, an action God took of His freely giving grace of creating anything in the first place. See, love is more than just a feeling. Love is commitment and actions towards people for the right reasons and almost unconditionally if it's God's love.
Right.
Now, there's no real thing. There's like the only ontological essence. Yeah, you only get that in the Trinity, and I just describe that as a property of the Trinity, or almost just as a description. Oh boy.
Thomism, yeah. I think it's interesting, but I'm not a Thomist, so I dropped something. Sorry, but
Tom seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, but I know a lot. It's weird because like I know a lot of Thomists that are like obsessed with Aquinas. Well, Aquinas and Thomas Aquinas, but that's how it is. So.
Yeah, I'm not a Thomist, but I love a lot of Aquinas' stuff.
All right, I'm gonna end the stream now. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I said before, let reason, wisdom, integrity, and reason guide your thinking.
All right. Well, by the way, before I close, guys, this Friday I'm going to release the the last video of my quantum hermeticism series. I'm gonna have it premiered on this channel, so when you see the notification, just you can watch it, and it's gonna be probably the best video I've done on this channel, I believe. So
not better than this one. I'm in this video.
I'm talking about formal videos, John. I'm not talking about any of that other stuff.
Not pure subjective conjecture. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for watching, and have a nice day.